Imagine spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on high-powered lawyers, like hiring forensic tech experts and navigating this brutal legal discovery process in federal court, all so you can examine the wiring inside a 30-year-old wooden box that plays Donkey Kong.
I mean, it's just completely unhinged.
Right. And today we are looking at the most bizarre defamation lawsuit of the decade, which is happening at the exact same time researchers just confirmed a highly organized 8-year-long civil war being fought by factions of chimpanzees. You absolutely have to stick around until the end of the episode for the arcade drama because the details are staggering.
Yeah, it is an absolute mess of a news cycle. The juxtaposition of what is happening globally versus what we are arguing about locally is just hard to wrap your head around today.
We are Mike and Abby, and welcome to Daily World Podcasts. Forget everything you know about boring news. We are taking the wildest, most impactful stories that hit the planet today and breaking them down so you don't have to.
Whether you are on a long drive, crushing a workout, or just feeling a little bored, we are here to keep you updated with the world and make your next hour incredibly interesting.
Honestly, looking at the board today, it is gritty, it is fast, and the planet is essentially vibrating with tension. You, sitting right there listening, you are living through one of the most compressed, high-stakes, 24-hour news cycles we have seen in years. Like, we have diplomats staring each other down in South Asia while neighborhoods are being leveled in the Mediterranean.
The pace is just exhausting. I mean, my brain is struggling to process how fast the geopolitical landscape is shifting today. We're seeing massive real-time consequences from decisions that were literally made just hours ago.
I know. And they're just jump straight into the fact that the Artemis II astronauts just got back from the moon and are aggressively refusing wheelchairs on Navy deck, but we actually cannot start there.
Right, no. We have to start with the diplomatic mess.
Exactly. We have to start with the diplomatic paradox unfolding in the Middle East right now. Because to understand how fractured the global narrative is today, we have to look at the negotiation table in Pakistan.
Yeah, the situation in Islamabad today is honestly a masterclass in cognitive dissonance.
Okay, let's get the timeline and the players straight here. Following a 2-week pause in hostilities that Pakistan managed to broker back on April 7th, we finally have high-level delegations meeting face-to-face. The United States and Iran are convening in Islamabad. Now, we really need to pause on that fact alone.
Yeah, because this is huge.
It is. This is the first direct, formal engagement between the two nations since 1979.
Right, think about the weight of 1979.
Yeah.
You have the Iranian Revolution, the storming of the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, the hostage crisis. I mean, since that moment, it has been decades of severed diplomatic ties, intense economic sanctions, and highly complex proxy conflicts across the entire region. They have communicated through intermediaries like Oman or Switzerland for nearly 50 years. And now suddenly, American and Iranian officials are sitting across from each other in a room in Pakistan.
And the makeup of the American delegation is fascinating, too. It's being led by Vice President J.D. Vance, alongside Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff, and perhaps the most highly scrutinized addition, Jared Kushner.
Right. Bringing Kushner into a formal diplomatic role for this specific crisis is definitely a calculated maneuver by the current administration.
How so?
Well, they are clearly looking to leverage his previous architectural role in the Abraham Accords. They want someone in the room who has a track record of negotiating, unorthodox regional agreements. But the proposal they are looking at from Tehran is entirely unorthodox.
Yeah, that's putting it mildly. They are currently looking at a revised 10-point proposal from Tehran, and the demands attached to it are massive. We're talking about the immediate reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, which is arguably the most important oil transit choke point on the planet.
Oh, without a doubt.
But Iran is not just offering to open it. They want to implement a toll-based transit system managed via IRGC routes.
Okay, let's clarify what that actually means for people.
Yeah.
The IRGC is the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. It is not just a branch of the Iranian military. It is a massive, highly resourced conglomerate that essentially functions as a state within a state.
Right.
So giving the IRGC the authority to manage a toll road for international shipping in the Strait of Hormuz is essentially handing them the keys to the world's gas station.
I am trying to picture how that even functions mechanically. Like, are we talking about literal toll booths in the ocean?
Probably not physical booths, no.
I imagine it's more like mandatory transit fees wired to state-controlled banks before a tanker is legally cleared to enter the shipping lane, which essentially turns global maritime law completely upside down.
Exactly.
The White House is reporting that the number of vessels passing through has already increased in the last 48 hours, which they are publicly interpreting as a sign that Iran is willing to coordinate maritime safety.
But the U.S. delegation is countering with their own 15-point plan. They are demanding unconditional, free international access to those shipping lanes in accordance with standard maritime law. I mean, a toll system managed by a military branch is a complete non-starter for global trade.
And the disputes at that table go way beyond shipping lanes. The Iranian National Security Council is formally demanding the full withdrawal of U.S. combat forces from the Middle East, along with compensation for war damages.
Which is never going to happen.
Right. Predictably, the U.S. has flat out rejected the withdrawal of any security bases. But the U.S. has also laid down a massive red line of its own. They are demanding the verified transfer of all enriched uranium to the United States as a mandatory prerequisite for any long-term peace agreement.
The logistics of a demand like that are just mind-bending. You do not just pack highly enriched uranium into a lid-lined FedEx box and put it on a cargo plane.
No, definitely not.
We're talking about moving intensely hazardous nuclear assets. It requires specialized, heavily shielded transport casks, armed escorts, and an entire network of international diplomatic clearances just to move it through foreign airspace.
And trying to arrange that level of highly vulnerable transport while the two nations are still technically locked in a massive geopolitical standoff is incredibly precarious.
Oh, absolutely.
Yet, despite all of this friction, Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif is out here giving press conferences describing the atmosphere in the room as positive.
Which brings us back to the cognitive dissonance. I mean, how can anyone look at a camera and call the diplomatic atmosphere positive when you look at the raw destruction happening just a few hundred miles away?
Because while they're drinking tea and discussing maritime tolls in Islamabad, Israel has launched what they are calling Operation Eternal Darkness in Lebanon.
And this is where the impartiality of the situation gets incredibly difficult to navigate. But we have to look strictly at the stated goals and the mechanical realities of the operation here. The ceasefire talks in Pakistan explicitly excluded Lebanon and Hezbollah. The U.S. proposal excluded them. The Iranian 10-point plan fiercely demands they be included. It is the primary sticking point.
And because they were deliberately left out of the regional truce, the Israeli military initiated an incredibly intense, highly accelerated campaign targeting Hezbollah infrastructure.
The scale of this operation is terrifyingly precise. On April 10th and 11th, the Israeli Defense Forces launched a massive, concentrated wave of airstrikes. Just look at the raw data. 160 munitions dropped by 50 fighter jets in exactly 10 minutes.
Let us pause and do the math on that airspace coordination.
Yeah.
That is 16 bombs detonating every single minute, or roughly one strike every 4 seconds.
Right. Orchestrating 50 jets moving at Mach speeds over a densely populated geographic area without them colliding or crossing into each other's blast radiuses, it requires a level of air traffic control synchronization that is almost unfathomable.
It is like trying to conduct a massive symphony where every instrument is a lethal weapon moving at the speed of sound.
The IDF stated their targets were 100 specific Hezbollah command centers scattered across Beirut, the Bekaa Valley, and southern Lebanon. The military officially warned civilians in northern Beirut that Hezbollah forces had repositioned their assets into civilian neighborhoods, which essentially expanded the theater of operations far beyond the traditional southern suburbs.
Right.
They deployed 1,000-pound munitions into deeply urbanized residential areas.
And the human cost of that specific military decision is catastrophic. Lebanese health officials reported on April 11th that the death toll reached 357 people, including 30 children and 71 women. According to those officials on the ground, it is the deadliest single day of the current conflict. There are over 1,223 confirmed wounded.
We're reporting these numbers impartially because we're conveying the facts as they are documented in the source material. But, as a human being processing this information, the reality on the ground is harrowing.
It is beyond harrowing. We are reading reports out of the American University of Beirut Medical College detailing how trauma surgeons had to operate on infants as young as 11 months old just to relieve severe cranial pressure caused by the weight of collapsed rubble.
It forces you to confront the sheer, horrific contrast of the day.
Yeah.
You have diplomats sitting in comfortable chairs negotiating the exact percentage of a shipping toll and simultaneously Trauma surgeons are pulling concrete off infants.
Yeah.
And the operation's name, Eternal Darkness, is reportedly a deliberate reference to the ninth plague of the Passover story. That signals a highly calculated phase of psychological warfare designed to demoralize the adversary.
And the chaos is not localized to the Mediterranean either. At the exact same time as the Islamabad talks, Iranian-aligned forces are launching highly coordinated drone swarms across the Gulf.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. The Kuwaiti military reported that National Guard personnel were actively injured after drones struck a base and heavily damaged vital facilities. Over in Bahrain, their defense forces intercepted 7 drones launched directly from Iranian territory. In Qatar, 4 civilians were injured by falling, burning debris in the Maraik district after the Qatari military intercepted incoming missiles in their airspace.
Iran's official argument here is highly technical. They are claiming that the temporary ceasefire brokered with the U.S. does not legally apply to what they categorize as regional defensive operations.
Ah, I see.
They actually went a step further and issued a public warning that any U.S. or allied attack on their domestic power grids would immediately trigger massive retaliatory strikes on the critical energy infrastructure of Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates.
They didn't just issue a vague threat either. They specifically published a highly detailed target list of strategic bridges and transit hubs in Saudi Arabia. That direct threat caused the Saudis to temporarily shut down the King Fahd Causeway to Bahrain entirely out of an abundance of caution. The Iranians are pointing their weapons directly at the beating heart of Saudi economic output, like the massive Sabic petrochemical complex in Jubail.
This is exactly why global diplomacy can feel so exasperating. You have officials in tailored suits shaking hands for the cameras in Pakistan, while a rain of missile debris falls on Qatar and city blocks are turned into craters in Beirut. I mean, if the Strait of Hormuz actually becomes a toll road managed by the IRGC, the entire global logistics network shifts overnight. It is a narrative that no single government can control.
If you are watching on YouTube right now, drop a comment if you think this Islamabad ceasefire has even a 0.1% chance of actually holding. I want to know if anyone sees a viable path forward here, because looking at the raw firepower being exchanged outside that conference room, it is just hard to be optimistic.
Seriously.
Now, that alone is wild, but it completely pales in comparison to the absolute mess we are about to get into regarding the First Lady going completely rogue at the White House. But to understand how completely fractured the global narrative is today and how wide the gap is between human precision and human failure, we actually have to look at the sky first. Let's talk about the Artemis II reentry.
Yeah, this contrast is the perfect summary of modern human existence. We are simultaneously achieving the pinnacle of technological perfection and failing to maintain a simple paved road in the Midwest.
Exactly. Let's start with the technological triumph. The Artemis II astronauts are finally back on Earth. The Orion spacecraft, specifically designated as the Integrity capsule, successfully executed its re-entry sequence and splashed down in the Pacific Ocean off the coast of San Diego at exactly 5:07 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time.
This was the historic, highly anticipated mission that took humans around the moon for the first time in over half a century. The crew Reed Wiseman, Victor Glover, Christina Koch, and Jeremy Hansen traveled a staggering 694,000 miles in total. They officially set a new human distance record, reaching 252,756 miles away from Earth.
The distance is incredible, but the physics of the re-entry sequence are what truly terrify me.
Oh, for sure.
The Integrity spacecraft hit the Earth's atmosphere traveling at 24,664 miles per hour. That translates to roughly 11 kilometers every single second.
I cannot even conceptualize moving that fast.
Yeah.
At that speed, the friction against the atmosphere generates an external temperature on the heat shield of 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit. That is 2,760 degrees Celsius.
The mechanics of that heat are fascinating. It is not just hot air. The capsule is moving so fast that it violently compresses the air in front of it. That compression generates so much thermal energy that it literally rips electrons away from the gas molecules, creating a massive envelope of superheated plasma around the spacecraft.
And that plasma field causes the notorious 6-minute communications blackout, right? Because I always assumed it was just the heat melting the antennas, but it's actually an electromagnetic issue.
Right. It is essentially a naturally occurring Faraday cage. Radio waves cannot penetrate a highly charged envelope of ionized plasma. So for 6 agonizing minutes, mission control is completely blind and deaf. They just have to trust that the math they did years ago holds up against 5,000 degrees of kinetic friction.
And the math held up flawlessly. NASA's precision on this landing is absurd. After traveling 250,000 miles through deep space, the capsule executed a highly complex 11-parachute deployment sequence and splashed down within 0.4% of their predetermined flight path target. It was an absolute bullseye in the middle of the Pacific Ocean.
The USS John P. Murtha managed the oceanic recovery. Navy divers deployed this incredible inflatable front porch raft system to extract the crew from the bobbing capsule. And what is brilliant from an engineering standpoint is that NASA is already planning to formally refurbish and reuse 286 specific components from this exact capsule for future Artemis missions.
But the most striking visual from the entire mission happened when they finally reached the deck of the recovery ship. After spending 10 days in zero gravity and enduring roughly 3.9 Gs of crushing physical force during that fiery re-entry, the 4 astronauts actively waved off the medical wheelchairs offered to them. They insisted on walking across the steel deck entirely unassisted.
NASA is crediting a newly developed, highly rigorous in-flight exercise protocol for their physical condition, but it is still just an incredible display of human endurance.
It is the absolute peak of human capability. Billions of dollars, decades of relentless engineering, orbital mechanics calculated down to the final decimal point, and flawless execution. And then we look at the solid ground in Nebraska.
Yes. Meanwhile, in Omaha, the Earth simply gave up and ate 2 vehicles.
Unbelievable.
On Pacific Street, a massive sinkhole collapse was caught on a security camera, and the footage immediately went viral. It swallowed a silver Ram pickup truck and a maroon Jeep Cherokee in the blink of an eye.
The void that opened up under the asphalt was roughly the size of a sand volleyball court. I was looking into the geology of this, and local experts are pointing to the rapid erosion of something called loess soil.
Loess is fascinating, but highly problematic for urban infrastructure. It is this fine-grained, wind-blown sediment that covers a massive portion of the Omaha metropolitan area. When loess is dry, it is incredibly stable. You can literally carve a vertical cliff face into it, and it will hold its shape.
Wow.
But the second it gets saturated with flowing water, it dissolves almost instantly, like a sugar cube in hot coffee.
So if you have a single leaking water pipe, it slowly washes away all the foundational sediment over months or years, creating a massive underground cavern. The asphalt street above it basically turns into a thin, brittle pie crust, hovering over absolutely nothing.
Precisely. Usually the city deals with about 340 minor cave-ins annually due to this specific soil type. But this one was uniquely dramatic because of the total lack of warning. One second, you are driving your Jeep, drinking your morning coffee, and the next second, the street vanishes and you are descending into the Omaha abyss.
Thankfully, both drivers miraculously managed to climb out of the crater unharmed. But the aftermath is where the sheer bureaucratic dysfunction of our society really shines.
Oh yeah, peak local government right there. You have NASA landing a spaceship within 0.4% of a target after traveling to the dark side of the moon, and then you have the Metropolitan Utilities District and the city of Omaha engaging in a petty, drawn-out legal fight over whose leaky pipe caused the sinkhole.
MUD is officially claiming that a collapsed city storm sewer triggered their water main to break, while the city engineers are vehemently arguing that the leaking MUD water main caused the void in the first place.
It is deeply reassuring, really. While the literal road beneath our tires is actively consuming full-sized pickup trucks, our local government officials are hard at work pointing fingers at each other in a boardroom over who gets to pay the plumbing bill. Truly inspiring leadership.
The Public Works Department actually managed to reopen the street to traffic just 9 days later, which is surprisingly fast considering they had to rebuild the foundation of the earth.
Yeah, credit where it's due.
But the security footage from the nearby University of Nebraska-Omaha camera turned that specific intersection into a weird, minor tourist attraction. People are actively going out of their way to visit the spot where the Earth just decided to hit the delete key on a Tuesday morning commute.
We will get back to the fallout of this crumbling infrastructure in a second, but first, you have to hear what happened at the White House, because we are looking at a literal civil war happening in the animal kingdom later, but right now, we have to pivot violently to Washington and South America.
The administration's ability to control its own narrative right now is rapidly disintegrating.
It is entirely fractured. Amidst the intensely delicate, high-stakes Iran war negotiations happening in Pakistan, First Lady Melania Trump delivered a completely unscripted, explicit public address directly from the grand foyer of the White House.
The stated goal of her address was to publicly and forcefully distance herself from the late financier Jeffrey Epstein. But investigative reports are rapidly surfacing, indicating that senior West Wing officials were in severe disagreement with her decision to speak out right now.
Internal sources are leaking that the West Wing viewed the timing of the statement as highly counterproductive.
Yeah, that.
You have the entire diplomatic apparatus of the United States trying to manage a fragile nuclear ceasefire, and suddenly the news cycle is hijacked by a controversy from decades ago. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt's office flat out refused to comment on the First Lady's statement when pressed by reporters.
So, looking impartially at the specific claims she made in her address, she explicitly and categorically denied ever being friends with Jeffrey Epstein or Ghislaine Maxwell. She stated for the record that she met Donald Trump entirely by chance in 1998, which directly contradicts long-standing tabloid rumors that Epstein was the one who introduced them.
She also directly addressed the documented 2002 email response that she sent to Maxwell. She characterized that specific email as nothing more than a polite reply to casual, trivial correspondence, completely devoid of any deeper relationship.
She was highly aggressive regarding the social media images circulating that allegedly show them together, directly challenging their authenticity. She made a very specific point to state to the cameras that her name has never appeared in any official court depositions, in the flight logs for the private plane, or in any victim statements provided to law enforcement.
Right.
And she's backed up that claim by listing entities, specifically naming James Carville and HarperCollins UK, that she has already successfully forced to retract similar claims through aggressive legal action.
But the most disruptive part of her statement was her direct call to action. She did not just defend herself. She formally demanded that the United States Congress hold a public hearing specifically designed for Epstein survivors to testify under oath and have their experiences entered into the official congressional record.
The timing is what makes this entire situation so baffling from a PR perspective. Why drop this intensely personal, highly aggressive legal statement right now? The president has been spending the last few weeks publicly dismissing the entire Epstein controversy as a fabricated Democrat hoax.
The contradiction is glaring. You have the president publicly calling the allegations a hoax. You have the West Wing desperately trying to manage a volatile military crisis in the Middle East. And you have the First Lady going completely rogue in the Grand Foyer demanding official congressional hearings. It is the definition of an uncontrollable narrative.
The messaging is completely fractured. And speaking of losing control, the United States is currently struggling to control a massive crisis regarding its own domestically manufactured products. Brazil and the U.S. just announced a major, unprecedented strategic partnership to stop what they are calling the Iron River of guns.
This represents a massive shift in diplomatic relations between Brazilian President Lula da Silva and the White House. They are attempting to intercept illicit arms shipments that are directly driving cartel and gang violence in major urban centers like Rio de Janeiro and São Paulo. The Brazilian government confirmed a staggering statistic. They have seized 1,168 illicit firearms imported directly from the United States in the last 12 months alone.
I'm trying to understand the physical mechanics of a smuggling operation of that magnitude. I'm picturing trying to find a handful of needles in a stack of 1,000 refrigerators.
Yeah.
How is the APF actually finding these weapons without ripping every single couch apart at the port?
Well, the ATF, which is the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, is facing an incredible logistical nightmare. The Iron River is not a physical river. It is a highly organized supply chain pipeline. These weapons are often purchased legally in U.S. states with very loose gun control laws. Then they are dismantled and hidden inside massive commercial shipping containers marked as mundane household goods. Couches, refrigerators, washing machines, you name it.
The sheer volume of international maritime trade makes it mathematically impossible to inspect every single container. If you stop to X-ray every refrigerator bound for South America, the global economy grinds to a halt.
Exactly. So this new bilateral agreement relies heavily on intelligence sharing. It includes sharing real-time, highly classified intelligence between ATF and the Brazilian Federal Police. They are also deploying advanced, newly developed scanning technology at major entry ports.
Brazil is now officially the first South American nation to receive this specific level of direct technical assistance from the U.S. just to track firearm serial numbers. It illustrates a profound loss of control.
Yeah, it really does.
The U.S. is struggling to manage its own domestic political narratives in Washington and simultaneously scrambling to sign international treaties just to stop its own weapons from fueling an urban war zone on another continent.
It is deeply unsettling when you look at the macro picture. The weapons flow south, the violence escalates, and it requires international treaties just to scan a barcode on a rifle hidden inside a used mattress.
That level of coordinated violence is terrifying, but it completely pales in comparison to the absolute mess we're about to get into regarding Coachella Day 1. But transition for a second, because humanity is not the only species organizing lethal hit squads right now.
I read this specific research paper, and it fundamentally altered how I view the concept of warfare in nature.
Right. On April 11th, evolutionary primatologists released a highly detailed investigative report documenting an 8-year-long civil war occurring right now in the Ngogo chimpanzee community, located deep in Uganda's Kibale National Park.
When you hear the phrase civil war applied to animals, you naturally assume it is a dramatic exaggeration by the media. It is not. Since 2018, researchers have meticulously documented 24 deliberate killings. That number includes 17 infants. Two distinct factions, which the scientists have labeled the Western and Central groups, are conducting what the report explicitly calls coordinated, lethal raids against one another.
It is a pure, unadulterated, us versus them conflict over physical territory. And the catalyst for this war is fascinating from a sociological standpoint.
Yeah, the trigger was wild.
The conflict was originally triggered by a leadership turnover back in 2015, which created instability. But the real spark was a severe respiratory epidemic that swept through the population in 2017.
That epidemic is the key. The virus specifically killed off the older, more established chimps. Those elders were essentially the bridge individuals, the diplomats that maintained the complex social ties and kept the peace between the growing, restless factions.
Once the diplomats were removed by the virus, the younger males splintered, and the violence escalated with terrifying speed. Researchers from the University of Texas documented the specific tactics used in these raids. It is brutal, close-quarters combat. They are kicking, dragging, and physically pounding isolated victims. And the researchers noted that it is not just the dominant males. Both males and females are actively participating in the coordinated attacks.
The lead primatologist stated that the Ngogo community basically became a victim of its own evolutionary success. The group grew to an intolerably large size, the local food and territory resources became severely strained, and without those elder bridge individuals to mediate, they fractured into violent, warring tribes.
What is truly terrifying about this observation is that warfare, at its absolute core, apparently does not require complex religion, intricate politics, or manufactured ideology. It is pure, raw evolutionary biology. The chimps simply became too numerous, divided themselves into an in-group and an out-group, and started executing each other to secure resources.
It mirrors human geopolitical behavior so closely that it is profoundly uncomfortable to read about.
Speaking of human geopolitical behavior, Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel just went on national television in Havana to issue a highly direct, incredibly stark warning to the United States.
Oh, this was intense.
Yeah, with U.S. naval assets steadily increasing their presence in the Florida Straits, Díaz-Canel stated that Cuban military forces are actively preparing to wage a decentralized guerrilla warfare campaign if the island is ever occupied.
He used very specific, highly charged language. He emphasized that every single mountain, street, and home would immediately become an active combat zone. He referred to this doctrine as a war of all the people strategy.
This is a massive escalation in diplomatic rhetoric. It is a direct, deliberate return to the classic, hardline revolutionary language of the 1960s. By invoking a war of all the people, he is signaling asymmetric warfare. You do not try to fight superior jet fighters with your own jets. You fight them by arming the populace and making the physical ground too bloody and costly to hold.
It suggests that the Cuban military is not even going to attempt a traditional, conventional defense of their borders. They are openly planning for a grinding, protracted insurgency.
Exactly.
And intelligence reports indicate that Havana is currently seeking closer military coordination with Iranian delegations that are active in the region. This is the first time in the 21st century that a Cuban leader has explicitly detailed a decentralized insurgency plan like this on a national broadcast.
You look at the chimps in Uganda conducting lethal raids over territorial boundaries, and then you look at humans in the Caribbean preparing for brutal house-to-house urban guerrilla warfare. The primal instinct to violently defend your territory is identical, We just scaled it up with high-powered rifles and naval destroyers.
If you are watching on YouTube right now, drop a comment. Would you rather be dropped into the middle of a chimp civil war in the Ugandan jungle or have to survive a Cuban mountain insurgency? Because both sound like absolute nightmares of primal survival, but I genuinely want to know which scenario you think is more survivable.
Honestly, I think the chimps might be more terrifying because it is purely visceral. There are no rules of engagement, no Geneva Convention, just teeth and raw strength.
Right.
And while all this raw survival is happening across the globe, we have this weirdly dystopian biological event happening right now on the coast of South Carolina. The billion-dollar horseshoe crab harvest is officially underway.
This is one of the strangest interactions between humans and nature. Each spring, the specific combination of high tides and full moons triggers a massive, ancient migration. These prehistoric arthropods emerge from the ocean and clump together by the thousands on the Atlantic shores for their annual spawning ritual.
Wildlife officials are actively having to patrol the beaches to warn tourists not to panic, because the crabs look like facehuggers from the movie Alien. But they are not in distress. They're just laying millions of eggs in the wet sand.
Yeah, don't touch them.
But the real story is the massive medical industry that relies on this specific migration. The bright blue blood of these crabs is absolutely critical for modern pharmaceutical testing.
The science behind this is incredible. Their blue blood contains a very specific chemical extract called limulus amoebocyte lysate, or LAL. When LAL comes into contact with even...
It reads like a discarded draft of a science fiction novel, but it is just a standard Tuesday on Earth. We have to look at the massive police sweep that just happened in London next. But first, we have to look at the absolute mess of live entertainment events happening right now.
Live events have essentially become an exercise in managing highly expensive chaos.
Exactly. Coachella Day 1, which was supposed to be a massive celebration for the 25th anniversary of the Desert Festival in Indio, California, kicked off this weekend, and it was immediately derailed by severe high winds and cascading production failures.
You have a completely sold-out crowd, a lineup heavily dominated by Gen Z pop stars, and the physical elements of the desert just refuse to cooperate with the schedule.
Sabrina Carpenter was one of the major draws, delivering a highly anticipated 20-song set. She essentially debuted a live cinematic experience on the main stage. Her performance opened with a pre-recorded short film featuring Sam Elliott, and she brought out surprise guest appearances by Samuel L. Jackson and Will Ferrell.
Which is wild.
Yeah, the media described it as a Hollywood story, utilizing high-end narrative filmmaking in a way you rarely see executed well at a chaotic music festival.
But while she was getting the flawless Hollywood treatment on the main stage, the rest of the festival was struggling to function. The highly popular electronic artist Anima was slated to close the main stage later that evening, but the entire set was abruptly canceled due to the high winds threatening the structural integrity of the stage rigging.
And then you have the situation with Swali over on the Sahara stage. His set got entirely derailed by strict municipal production curfews. They literally cut his power mid-performance. He was visibly furious, reportedly begging the production crew over a dead microphone for just one more song after the sound system was hard disconnected. The stage lights went completely black, and he had to be physically escorted off stage by security personnel.
It highlights the sterile, highly overproduced nature of modern music festivals. You pay thousands of dollars for a VIP wristband, you are standing in the freezing desert wind, and a major multi-platinum hip-hop artist gets his power cord yanked out of the wall because a municipal clock hit a specific minute. It completely suffocates the raw, live energy of the art.
Totally. Compare that highly sanitized, rigid environment to what happened at the Grand National Horse Race in the UK.
Oh, the Grand National was unbelievable. This is the most famous steeplechase in the world. They actually reduced the field size to 34 horses this year to try and improve safety metrics, and they implemented a standing start to reduce the initial chaos. But the sheer unpredictability of a live animal was still off the charts. On Saturday, the horse I Am Maximus, trained by the legendary Willie Mullins, secured his second Reentry win in a historic, wildly unpredictable finish.
I Am Maximus was the heavy favorite going into the race, but he nearly fell completely at the fourth fence. It was a massive, violent stumble in a grueling race like the National, making a major physical mistake that early on usually drains the horse's stamina and ruins your chances.
But his recovery and the subsequent sprint to the finish line is what made it legendary. He overtook the leaders at the elbow with an incredible storming run through the final furlong. The equestrian media is already hailing it as one of the greatest individual athletic performances by a horse in the history of the event.
It is raw athleticism and pure unpredictability. You cannot script a 1,000-pound animal recovering from a near fall to win a grueling steeplechase. It is the exact opposite of a festival cutting the power right on schedule. Meanwhile, in the realm of global politics, some events are entirely too predictable.
Yes, the Djibouti election results just officially dropped.
Wow, what a massive shock. The guy who has been in power for 27 consecutive years and literally forced a change to the national constitution just so he could legally run again, somehow managed to secure exactly 97.8% of the vote. Edge of your seat democracy right there. I was really holding my breath.
On April 11th, the Djibouti Ministry of the Interior proudly announced that incumbent President Ismail Omar Guelleh won a sixth straight term with 97.81% of the total vote. His sole permitted challenger, a man named Mohamed Farah Samatar, received a staggering 2.19%.
Guerilla is 78 years old. He has controlled the nation since 1999. And the only reason his name was even legally allowed on the ballot this week is because a highly convenient constitutional amendment passed in 2025 explicitly removed the 75-year-old age cap for the presidency.
Djibouti is not just a random country, though. It is strategically vital to global security. It physically hosts major, highly active military bases for the United States, China, and France. So international observers from the African Union were present, and they officially noted the vote was peaceful, despite the glaring fact that several major opposition parties boycotted the entire electoral process in protest.
His victory margin this year is nearly identical to his 2021 performance, where he secured 97.4%. It is the illusion of a democratic event. It's a completely predetermined outcome packaged and broadcast as a legitimate election.
Which brings us to the ultimate internet showdown involving Donkey Kong. But first, we have to look at the severe global crackdowns hitting citizens right now, because state governments are rapidly tightening their grip on civil liberties everywhere.
The scale of state intervention and surveillance we are seeing deployed today is deeply alarming.
Let's start in London. The Metropolitan Police executed a massive, highly coordinated sweep at Trafalgar Square. On Saturday, April 11th, they arrested 212 people during a mass public demonstration.
Processing 212 arrests at a single protest is a staggering logistical undertaking for any police force. The demonstration was organized to protest the UK government's recent, highly controversial ban on the activist group Palestine Action, which the government officially prescribed as a terrorist organization under UK law. That specific prescription is actually still under active legal challenge in the High Court, but the police acted on the mandate anyway.
The Metropolitan Police issued a statement confirming that every single one of those 212 arrests was made on the grounds of showing support for a prescribed organization under Section 12 of the Terrorism Act 2000. Under UK law, that is a severe criminal offense punishable by up to 14 years in prison.
The threshold for arrest was incredibly broad. The protesters were carrying signs reading, "I oppose genocide, I support Palestine Action," and holding large banners stating, "Jurors deserve to hear the whole truth."
The optics of the police response are incredibly dystopian. The citizens arrested ranged in age from 27 to 82 years old. There is a striking verified press image circulating that shows multiple police officers physically lifting and carrying an 82-year-old woman who is using 2 walking sticks away from the public square.
Former Met Superintendent Dal Babu actually went on the BBC this morning to criticize the operation. He stated that deploying the resources to arrest hundreds of people who are essentially standing in a square willing to be detained is not practical and presents a highly challenging optic for the credibility of the police force.
I am looking at the legal parameters here. How does an 82-year-old woman with walking sticks get charged with a severe terror offense, facing 14 years in prison, simply for holding a piece of cardboard referencing a jury? Impartially speaking, looking at the sheer volume of arrests under the Terrorism Act against citizens in a public square, it represents a massive, highly visible escalation in the application of state power.
Among the demonstrators detained was Robert Del Naja, the lead singer of the band Massive Attack. He publicly called the police U-turn on mass arrests, deeply authoritarian. It is the chilling effect of sweeping security legislation. When laws are written broadly enough, holding a sign can be legally categorized as terrorism.
Yeah.
And if you want to talk about the systemic abuse of state power, we need to look at the federal court documents just released regarding a maximum security prison in Florida, known locally as Alligator Alcatraz.
This facility is under a massive federal civil rights investigation right now. Court documents filed this week allege a series of violent, highly coordinated incidents inside the prison where inmate communication phones were intentionally disconnected by staff immediately prior to several targeted gang beatings.
The facility earned the nickname Alligator Alcatraz because it is geographically located deep in a swampy region of the Everglades, making physical escape virtually impossible. But the allegations being investigated here are that the prison staff were fully complicit in allowing specific prison gangs to operate with violent impunity.
The terrifying part is the specific method they used. According to the filings, staff would initiate a phone blackout. They would physically cut the internal communication lines, preventing the targeted inmates from calling out for legal aid, family assistance, or external intervention. Once the communication blackout was confirmed, the violence would begin.
Federal investigators are actively trying to determine if these communication blackouts were a systematic, administrative tool used to punish inmates. The fact that external communication was the very first thing neutralized before a physical attack has led legal experts to compare the tactics to military-style psychological operations. You completely isolate the target, you remove their ability to broadcast what is happening, and then you allow the violence to occur in a localized vacuum. It is horrific.
It is the systemic loss of communication weaponized against vulnerable individuals. And on a macro scale, we are seeing the exact same tactic, the systemic loss of trade weaponized against entire populations in South America.
Colombia and Ecuador are currently locked in a diplomatic and economic death spiral.
On April 10th, the Colombian government slapped a massive, unprecedented 100% import tax on all goods originating from Ecuador. This is a retaliatory tariff war. Ecuador had recently hiked their own tariffs, and this rapid, tit-for-tat economic escalation is deeply rooted in a massive political breakdown over the detention of a high-profile politician named Jorge Glass, compounded by accusations of border negligence regarding illicit drug flows.
A 100% tariff rate is essentially unheard of. It is one of the highest punitive rates ever seen between two Mercosur-affiliated nations. Mercosur is the massive Southern Common Market designed to promote free trade.
Right.
By implementing a 100% tax on agricultural products, textiles, and manufactured goods, Colombia is effectively halting all legal cross-border trade between the two neighbors. It is an embargo by another name. Ecuador is publicly calling the move unilateral and aggressive, while Colombia claims it is absolutely necessary for their national security.
But the real-world impact on the citizens is devastating. Economic experts are warning today that this specific trade war is going to spike the consumer cost of basic, essential food staples like rice and milk by as much as 40% in border communities by next week. How does a working-class family absorb a sudden 40% increase in the price of milk overnight just because of a diplomatic spat over a detained politician?
They cannot absorb it. It is an economic starvation tactic. You look at the prison guards cutting the phone lines to isolate the inmates, and you look at the Colombian government cutting the trade lines to isolate Ecuador's economy. It is the exact same mechanism of control, just applied at different scales.
In a very rare moment of functional cooperative governance, though, Libya finally managed to approve its first unified national budget in over a decade. Since the violent fall of the Gaddafi regime, the country has been fundamentally split down the middle between rival administrative governments in the east and the west, operating with entirely separate financial systems and central banks.
Getting this budget approved is a massive prerequisite for holding national elections and finally integrating the divided central bank. The new budget includes significant, desperately needed allocations for rebuilding their crippled energy infrastructure. And crucially, it includes the first transparent public accounting of state oil revenues in years. It effectively ends the chaotic dual-budget era that allowed local, heavily armed militias to siphon state funds from rival central bank branches with zero oversight.
The Central Bank of Libya issued a highly optimistic statement saying this agreement proves the nation is capable of overcoming its differences. It is a small ray of hope in a very dark, chaotic news cycle. Which brings us finally to the grand finale, the sports heartbreak in London, the celebrity legal fallout, and the ultimate arcade legal battle that has the internet completely captivated.
I am still trying to process the legal mechanics of demanding a Donkey Kong cabinet in a federal lawsuit.
We will get to the arcade drama in a second. First, absolute heartbreak for Arsenal fans. On April 11th, Arsenal suffered a devastating 1-0 loss against Bournemouth at the Emirates Stadium.
With only a few weeks remaining in the Premier League season, every single match is a critical test, and Arsenal failed to perform on their home turf. The decisive, heartbreaking goal came late in the second half, scored by Alex Scott, who capitalized on a severe defensive lapse in the penalty box.
And the irony here is just brutal for the fans. Alex Scott was a major, highly publicized transfer target for Arsenal last summer. They aggressively tried to buy his contract, failed, and now he shows up at their own stadium and scores the game-winning strike against them. The sports media is universally calling it a poetic and painful moment for the home crowd. Manager Mikel Arteta addressed the press and frankly called his team's performance nervy.
This defeat is mathematically massive. It prevents Arsenal from extending their lead at the top of the league table. They are currently sitting at 82 points after 34 matches. Manchester City is lurking right behind them with 81 points, and crucially, City has a game in hand against Chelsea. This loss gives Manchester City a massive, unexpected lifeline for the title. Pep Guardiola even noted in his press conference that his team must be perfect to capitalize on this specific opening.
Moving from the pitch to entertainment legal fallout, court documents confirmed today that the highly contentious divorce between former Maroon 5 bassist Mickey Madden and his spouse has been officially finalized by a judge.
This ruling follows years of intense litigation stemming from severe claims of domestic abuse that originally led to Madden's abrupt exit from the music industry and the band back in 2020. The presiding court noted the split was legally irreconcilable. The specific financial details of the settlement are strictly confidential, ending a nearly 6-year legal saga in the shadows.
But the crucial kicker here, which was exclusively reported by TMZ this morning, is that the final divorce papers reportedly include a permanent restraining order. That is a highly rare, very significant legal move in high-profile celebrity settlements. Madden has not performed publicly since the initial allegations surfaced, and his former bandmates have maintained complete radio silence, issuing zero statements regarding the finalization of the case today.
It is a quiet, grim end to a long, ugly legal process, which contrasts sharply with the incredibly loud, highly public, utterly bizarre legal circus happening in the retro gaming community right now.
Yes, the Donkey Kong defamation lawsuit. On April 11th, Karl Jobst, who is a prominent Australian YouTuber with over 1 million subscribers dedicated to gaming history, filed a massive new defamation lawsuit against Billy Mitchell.
For those who are not deeply embedded in retro arcade lore, Billy Mitchell is the highly controversial, highly recognizable former world record holder for Donkey Kong. He is arguably one of the most famous figures in classic arcade history, but his high scores have been heavily scrutinized, dissected, and disputed by the competitive speedrunning community for years.
Jobst alleges in the filing that Mitchell's recent public statements have irreparably harmed his professional reputation for credibility and trustworthiness. This new filing actually follows the conclusion of a previous, bitter legal dispute between the two parties back in 2025. Jobst is now seeking significant financial damages for lost revenue, claiming his channel's earnings took a massive, calculable hit, specifically because Mitchell publicly accused him of fraudulent investigative reporting.
But the absolute wildest part of this lawsuit, the reason this is making international news headlines today, is the legal discovery process. Jobst's legal team has included a highly specific discovery request demanding physical, unrestricted access to Mitchell's original arcade hardware.
Wait, I am picturing the logistics of this. How do you legally demand the surrender of a 30-year-old wooden box? Are they going to wheel an arcade cabinet into a federal courtroom?
Yes, potentially. The core of this entire decade-long conspiracy theory in the speedrunning community revolves around emulation. The community suspects that Mitchell's record-breaking scores were not achieved on original unmodified Nintendo arcade hardware, but rather that he used software emulation, like MMA or physically modified circuit boards. Emulation allows a player to use save states to splice together a perfect run from hundreds of attempts. Original hardware does not allow that.
So by formally demanding the physical hardware in legal discovery, Jobst is forcing a definitive, court-ordered technical ruling on the authenticity of the machine itself. They're going to have forensic tech experts analyzing the soldering on Donkey Kong motherboards under oath to settle a YouTube feud.
If you are watching on YouTube, drop a comment right now. Do you think the forensic analysis of this arcade hardware is going to prove he faked the scores? Or is this officially the most ridiculous lawsuit of 2026? Because the sheer amount of billable legal hours being burned over an 8-bit Guerilla game is astounding.
It really makes you think about our priorities, though. Look at the immense scale of everything we covered today. You have the US and Iran staring each other down in a room in Islamabad while Israel drops 160 munitions on Lebanon in 10 minutes. You have chimpanzees engaging in a brutal, meticulously organized 8-year civil war over jungle territory. The earth in Nebraska is literally dissolving and swallowing daily commuters. The global systems, the infrastructure, the diplomatic channels, they all feel incredibly fragile, like they're hanging by a thread right now.
They are fragile. We are watching the seams of modern society being stress-tested on multiple disparate fronts simultaneously.
So honestly, maybe our collective obsession with litigating 30-year-old video game high scores or arguing passionately about hip-hop festival curfews is exactly what we need. When international relations are crumbling and primal warfare is a documented reality across species, maybe obsessing over the purity of a Donkey Kong arcade motherboard is the only psychological defense mechanism keeping us remotely sane.
It is a highly specific, very necessary grounding distraction from the eternal darkness of the real world.
All right, if we made your drive, your workout, or your downtime even a little bit better today, do us a massive favor. Whether you are watching on YouTube, streaming on Spotify, listening on Apple Podcasts, or literally anywhere else, hit that follow or subscribe button right now. We drop episodes like this every single day, bringing you the world's news in the most interesting way possible. Lock in, because you do not want to miss the crazy stories we have queued up for tomorrow. See you then.